Under the steady hum of engines aboard Air Force One, President Donald Trump stood before a small group of reporters, his tone clear and unambiguous. When asked whether the United States was considering military strikes against Venezuela, he responded with a single firm word: no. That one-word reply carried weight, signaling a decisive moment in Washington's ongoing posture toward the embattled South American nation. The question came amid a backdrop of rising speculation. In recent weeks, a series of US military deployments across the Caribbean and Latin America had raised eyebrows internationally. Officially, Washington described the build-up as part of a major anti-narcotics operation aimed at disrupting drug trafficking networks operating from Venezuela and surrounding waters. Yet, observers across Latin America questioned whether the operation was purely about drugs or whether it signaled a broader show of force aimed at the government of Nicolás Maduro. For months, tensions between Washington and Caracas had been simmering. The United States continues to recognize opposition leader Juan Guaidó as Venezuela's legitimate interim president, rejecting Maduro's claim to power as fraudulent. Economic sanctions, asset freezes, and diplomatic isolation have been key instruments in US policy. But the notion of military action, even if hinted, has always carried the potential to destabilize the entire region. Trump's denial was meant to send a message, not just to the Venezuelan leadership, but also to allies and critics who feared escalation. His brief response aboard the presidential aircraft underscored a shift from rhetoric to restraint. No, he said again when pressed further, as the sound of the engines drowned out the follow-up questions. There would be no strikes, at least not for now. Still, US officials have not been shy about maintaining pressure on Caracas. The Southern Command, based in Florida, has continued to monitor Venezuelan waters closely. US Navy ships and surveillance aircraft have expanded patrols in what Washington calls counter-narcotics support operations. Intelligence sharing with regional partners, including Colombia, Panama, and the Netherlands Caribbean territories, has intensified. In Washington, defense analysts interpret this dual posture: military readiness without direct confrontation, as part of a calibrated strategy. The White House seeks to weaken Maduro's financial lifelines through sanctions while maintaining a visible deterrent in nearby waters. It's a strategy designed to project strength without triggering open conflict. Meanwhile, Venezuelan officials have condemned the US maneuvers as acts of aggression. Foreign Minister Ivan Gil called the military deployments a provocation disguised as anti-drug cooperation, accusing Washington of trying to intimidate the Venezuelan armed forces. The Maduro government has responded with its own military exercises, mobilizing troops near coastal bases and broadcasting footage of fighter jets conducting air patrols over the Caribbean Sea. Inside Venezuela, the mood is one of weary defiance. Years of political stalemate, economic collapse, and international isolation have left ordinary citizens skeptical of both domestic and foreign promises. While state television portrays US actions as imperial threats, independent Venezuelan media emphasize the suffering caused by sanctions, shortages of medicine, spiraling inflation, and crumbling infrastructure. Trump's comments, though brief, were enough to recalibrate diplomatic conversations in Latin American capitals. In Bogotá, Colombian officials welcomed the reassurance that Washington was not seeking war, emphasizing their preference for diplomatic and democratic transitions. Brazil, too, expressed cautious relief, though defense officials in Brasilia noted that American naval presence in the Caribbean remains unusually high. Behind closed doors, White House advisors continue to balance competing objectives. On one hand, the administration insists on maintaining a maximum pressure campaign against Maduro's regime. On the other, it must avoid alienating regional partners who fear that military escalation could unleash a new wave of refugees and instability across borders already strained by migration. At Joint Base Andrews, before boarding Air Force One, Trump's body language had been typical of his off-the-cuff exchanges, confident, terse, and unfiltered. Reporters pressed him on whether the US was considering other options, such as covert operations or maritime blockades. The president declined to elaborate. "We're watching very closely," he said, gesturing briefly toward the press pool. "We're doing a great job on the drugs." Tremendous job, but no strikes, none at all. That phrasing, "no strikes," has since echoed through Washington's foreign policy circles. Analysts note that while Trump's style often leaves room for reinterpretation, his words this time were unusually straightforward. Unlike past instances where he hinted at keeping all options on the table, this declaration seemed designed to de-escalate speculation. However, the US military's presence in the region remains unmistakable. Satellite imagery shows American destroyers and reconnaissance aircraft maintaining steady patrol routes. The Pentagon has confirmed that at least 4 Navy ships, including the USS Lassen and the USS Kidd, are participating in maritime monitoring operations alongside aircraft from the US Air Force and Coast Guard. Officials in the Department of Defense stress that these missions are targeted at transnational criminal organizations, not at Venezuelan military assets. Yet the line between counter-narcotics enforcement and geopolitical messaging can be thin. Each patrol, each press briefing, and each photo of an American warship near Venezuelan waters feeds into a narrative of strategic vigilance. Caracas, for its part, remains defiant. Maduro's government continues to accuse the United States of funding dissident groups and attempting to foment coups. Venezuelan state television has replayed footage of US troops in the Caribbean with dramatic music and commentary warning of imperialist interference. In a televised speech, Maduro declared that Venezuela will defend every inch of its territory and claimed that no empire can intimidate the Bolivarian people. But beyond the rhetoric, regional observers see a more pragmatic reality emerging. The US stance under Trump reflects a blend of domestic political calculation and cautious realism. With an election season approaching, the White House is eager to project strength against authoritarian regimes while avoiding the risk of foreign entanglement. A direct confrontation with Venezuela would carry high costs and unpredictable consequences, both militarily and politically. Economically, the sanctions imposed on Caracas have already crippled much of its oil-dependent economy. Venezuela's crude exports have dropped sharply, and the country's access to international credit remains severely limited. Humanitarian agencies estimate that more than 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country since the crisis began, creating one of the largest migration waves in the Western Hemisphere. Trump's comments therefore serve a dual purpose, signaling firmness to his domestic base while reassuring regional allies that Washington prefers containment over confrontation. We're not looking for regime change through war, one senior administration official later clarified anonymously. We're looking for leverage, and we already have it. In the months ahead, the balance between deterrence and diplomacy will likely continue to define US-Venezuela relations. American officials are expected to maintain the pressure campaign through economic sanctions and intelligence operations, while keeping open channels for dialogue via third parties like Switzerland or regional organizations such as the Organization of American States. For now, the skies above the Caribbean remain busy but calm. American reconnaissance aircraft fly their routes. Venezuelan patrol boats stay close to shore. The message from Washington is clear: the United States is watching but not striking. In the end, the exchange aboard Air Force One captures a defining element of Trump's foreign policy: assertive posturing paired with sudden restraint. His blunt refusal, no, stands as both a statement of intent and a reminder of the unpredictability that surrounds US decision-making. For the people of Venezuela, the significance is more than symbolic. Each word from Washington affects markets, morale, and migration. For Latin American leaders, it offers breathing space, a chance to pursue regional diplomacy without the shadow of imminent conflict. And for US strategists, it marks another chapter in a long, complicated game, one fought as much through words and sanctions as through ships and soldiers. As Air Force One descended toward its next stop, the brief exchange faded into the hum of the engines. But in the corridors of power, from Caracas to Bogotá, from Washington to Brasilia, the echo of that single word still lingers: no.